All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are tackling one of the biggest, most enduring mysteries in all of human history, the Lost City of Atlantis.
I mean, just think about it for a second. What if the greatest civilization in all of history was just swallowed by the sea? An incredible empire with technology and wisdom that was way ahead of its time, just gone in a single day and night. It's this one powerful idea that has totally captivated people for thousands of years. It's the story of a perfect world lost forever to the waves. But where did a story this epic even begin?
Now, you'd probably think a legend this huge would be everywhere, right? Written on ancient scrolls, told in myths from cultures all over the globe. But the crazy thing is, it's not. The entire sprawling legend of Atlantis, the thing that's inspired all those books and movies, it all comes from one single source. And that source? The ancient Greek philosopher Plato, writing way back around 360 BC. Yep, that's it. Every single thing we think we know about Atlantis comes from just two of his works, the Timaeus and the Critias. So he wasn't just writing down some ancient legend he'd heard. Nope, he was the one who introduced it to the world. So if we want to get to the bottom of this mystery, we've got to start right there with him. So what did Plato actually say?
Okay, so let's get into the original tale, the story as Plato himself told it. And let's be clear, we're not just talking about some little city-state here. This was a continental power, a total force of nature that pretty much dominated the ancient world.
So right off the bat, the scale is just mind-blowing. Plato says Atlantis was out in the Atlantic Ocean, past the Pillars of Hercules, which, is what we call the Strait of Gibraltar today. And he's not talking about some little island getaway. No way. He describes a landmass that was bigger than North Africa and modern Turkey combined. It was this massive naval superpower that basically ran the show across a huge empire. And at the very center of this massive empire, there was a capital city. And this place, it was so perfectly designed, so unbelievably advanced. It sounds like it was ripped straight out of a sci-fi movie. And this is where it gets really wild. The level of detail Plato gives us is just incredible. He describes this city as an engineering masterpiece. It had these massive harbors, big enough for a huge navy, and these intricate canals that connected everything. He talks about temples that were literally shimmering with silver and gold, and this mysterious fiery red metal he calls orichalcum. He says it was the most valuable thing in the world, right after gold. This was a civilization at the absolute tippy top of its power and wealth, supposedly descended from the sea god Poseidon himself. But you know how these stories go. Like any great tragedy, this perfect world, well, it wasn't built to last. And the fall of Atlantis, according to Plato, wasn't just some random natural disaster. No, it started from the inside. A kind of moral rot. And this quote right here, it gets right to the heart of Plato's story. See, the Atlanteans, they started out noble and good, but they got corrupted by their own power. Their divine part faded, as Plato put it, and they were just consumed by greed, arrogance, and a thirst for more power. They even started this huge war to enslave Athens and the rest of Europe. It was this moral collapse, this hubris, that ultimately sealed their fate.
Okay, and this comparison is so important if you want to understand what Plato was really doing. He wasn't just telling some cool bedtime story. He was crafting a philosophical allegory. So on one side, you've got his version of a perfect ancient Athens, all virtuous, orderly, and moderate. And on the other side, you've got Atlantis, corrupt, greedy, and trying to take over the world. See what he's doing? Atlantis is the perfect bad guy for his perfect good guy. It's basically a thought experiment to show why his ideal society was so much better.
And then comes the big finish. So, after the good guy Athenians somehow managed to defeat this massive Atlantean army, the gods step in to deliver the final verdict. Plato describes these violent earthquakes and floods that just ravage the island. And then, in a single, terrible day and night, the entire continent of Atlantis disappeared into the sea. Gone. Forever.
So for centuries and centuries, pretty much every scholar got it. They understood Plato's story was an allegory, a teaching tool. But then, in the 1800s, something shifted, and the hunt for real historical Atlantis began for real. You can kind of see the whole thing shift on this timeline. For more than 2,000 years, Atlantis was just a literary idea. Then, boom, 1882.
A former American congressman named Ignatius Donnelly writes a book called Atlantis, the Antediluvian World. And this book was a huge hit. He argued that Plato's story was 100% real history, and that Atlantis was the mother of all civilizations. It was this one book that totally lit the fuse for our modern obsession, turning a philosophical story into a full-blown quest. So if people are looking for it, where are they looking? Well, the most famous and probably the most tempting theory puts Atlantis right in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Okay, so check this out. Around 1600 BC, the island of Thera, which we now call Santorini, was home to a super advanced civilization, the Minoans. And then a volcano there erupted with just unimaginable power. We're talking one of the biggest eruptions in human history. It literally blew the center of the island to pieces, creating a massive crater in the sea and kicking off these devastating tsunamis. So you have an advanced island civilization wiped up by the sea in a huge cataclysm. I mean, the parallels are pretty obvious, right? But, and this is a really big but, the timing is off by thousands of years compared to Plato's story. The location doesn't quite fit, and yeah, most experts today just don't think this was the literal Atlantis.
All right, theory number 2. This one is really compelling because it takes us pretty much exactly where Plato told us to go, just outside the Pillars of Hercules.
Way back when, in what's now southern Spain, there was a real and incredibly wealthy civilization called Tartessos. And guess what? It was famous for being rich in metals, just like Atlantis. It was located near this big coastal plain, and there's actual geological evidence that the whole area got hammered by a massive tsunami. The location, the riches, the geography, a lot of the details actually line up surprisingly well with what Plato wrote. It makes it a really strong contender, at least for the inspiration.
Okay, our third idea is a bit different. It's not a city, not an empire. It's an entire lost world, a real-life Atlantis, but in the North Sea. So way back during the last ice age, the sea levels were way lower, and there was this huge piece of land that connected Great Britain to mainland Europe. It was called Doggerland. And it wasn't empty. It was a rich landscape full of hunter-gatherers. But as the ice melted, the sea started to rise. And then, about 8,200 years ago, a giant undersea landslide off the coast of Norway set off a monster tsunami that just swallowed what was left. Now, Doggerland is definitely not Plato's Atlantis, but its story is powerful proof that entire populated lands can and do vanish under the waves. And that kind of event would create a cultural memory that could last for generations.
All right. So after looking at the original legend and then sifting through all these real-world clues, where does that leave us? What's the final verdict on the Lost City of Atlantis?
To really get the answer, we have to go back to what Plato was trying to do in the first place. And that means we need to understand this one key idea: allegory. See, an allegory isn't supposed to be read like a history book. It's a story that's designed to have a deeper, hidden meaning, usually a moral or a political one. And when you talk to the experts today, the philologists and classicists who spend their lives studying Plato's work, the consensus is overwhelming. It's totally clear. Atlantis was not a real historical place. It was a brilliant, masterful invention, a story created to serve Plato's own philosophical ideas. So the big question isn't, was it real, but why did he make it up? And the answer is that Plato created Atlantis as an incredibly powerful teaching tool. It was a cautionary tale, right? A story about what happens when a society gets too powerful, too arrogant, too greedy. It was the perfect enemy to make his ideal society, Athens, look even better. And yeah, he probably borrowed details from real stuff that was happening, like the memory of the Thera eruption, or maybe stories about Tartessos, or even the Trojan War, to make his fake story feel totally real and powerful. But that leaves us with one last and maybe the most fascinating question of all. If we know it's not real, why are we still so obsessed with it? Why do we keep searching? The legend of Atlantis just has this power that never seems to fade. It really speaks to this deep down human desire for a lost paradise, a golden age where things were better. So maybe the search for Atlantis was never really about finding a city under the sea. Maybe it's always been about the hope that somewhere, at some time, a better world was actually possible.